welcome to our webinar. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Conchita Hernandez, and I'm the Maryland State Blind and Low Vision Specialist. Today's session is part of the expanded core curriculum series that the Maryland School for the Blind Outreach Department is hosting. We have Dr. Wolffe with us today, and we have other sessions with her as well. Our first session was recorded and is up on our YouTube page. I will post the link in the chat box. We also have other experts in the field around the ECC, and I will put the full listing in the chat box with registration links. All of our webinars are recorded and posted to our YouTube page unless otherwise indicated, and you can subscribe to our YouTube channel, and I will post a link in the comments. If you have not registered for Diane Sheeline's webinar on sensory balance and you live in Maryland, you will want to do so because we're giving away free sensory balance manuals to our Maryland registrants. So go ahead and register for that if you have not. You can also post your questions in the chat box and Dr. Wolffe will answer them at the end. So now I am going to read Dr. Wolffe's bio. So Dr. Karen Wolffe manages a private practice as a career counselor and consultant in Austin, Texas. She coordinates content for the World Blind Union's employment resource website, Project Aspiro, consults with organizations and schools worldwide on employability skills, training, and transition programming for individuals with visual disabilities, and teaches distance education courses. In 2021, she published a report on global employment facilitators and barriers for the World Blind Union. In addition, she completed work on the Florida Blind Services Foundation vocational evaluation tool and shepherded its use in Canada with CNIB's service delivery arm, Vision Loss Rehabilitation, VLR. Finally, she produced a virtual training series for VLR employees and related service providers in Canada on career education for children and youth with vision loss. Her employment history includes work with Salus University and Perkins e-learning, for whom she has taught online courses, as well as the American Foundation for the Blind as Director of Professional Development and Career Connect, AFB's online employment and mentoring service, course development and instruction at Hadley School for the Blind, and as a faculty member in the Department of Special Education at the University of Texas in Austin, where she also directed the Job Readiness Clinic, an applied learning lab for people with disabilities looking for work and university students studying to become rehabilitation counselors or special education teachers. Dr. Wolffe has written extensively and lectured worldwide on the importance of careers and employment, social skills development, social determination, self-determination, and transition in the lives of people with visual disabilities. So thank you and welcome, Dr. Wolffe. Thank you so much for being here with us today, and I will turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, Conchita. I appreciate you introducing the session, and welcome to all of the participants. I appreciate you joining me today. Hopefully many of you were here for last week's session, but this week I'm going to focus on career education for students with visual impairments at the middle school and high school level, including those with additional disabilities. Before I jump into my content, I just want to say that I may not make it to questions today just because of the time constraints. But if you put questions into the chat with an email address, I will definitely reach out to you and respond to your questions. If you have questions following the webinar and you would like to reach out to me, please feel free to do so. I'm easy to access, but you have to spell my name correctly because my email address is basically my name, karenwolffe@gmail.com. And Wolffe is spelled W-O-L-F-F-E. Please don't hesitate. Let me know if I can be of any help to you. I want to quickly review for you what I mentioned last week in my initial session, which is that always with career education, you need to be thinking about next environment. Begin your work with students with the end in sight. Recognizing that the outcome goal for all youth is to reach their potential, to grow up happy, healthy, and to be productive citizens, regardless of their attributes, gender, race, nationality, religious or secular orientation, ability, or disability. Please keep that outcome goal in mind as you work with young people. These next couple of slides are also review reminders for you from last week about what we as adults must do to support children with visual impairments. And there are just 5 things that you always need to be thinking about as you work with kids in developing their lives and developing their careers. Convey your high expectations of the youngsters with whom you work. Articulate that for them. Encourage socialization. Encourage the students you work with not to just socialize with you or other adults, but to socialize amongst their peers, because that's their support group moving forward into life, and frankly, their competition for work and partners as they age out of our system, K to 12. Develop and reinforce those blindness-specific skills that youngsters need in order to be successful without good vision, those non-visual techniques. Provide realistic feedback. Let youngsters know what they are doing well and what made you realize in their behavior, their actions, that they were performing well. And when you need to give them feedback about something that they're doing that's not perfect or not up to expectations, let them know what it is they're doing that doesn't meet your standards and how they might resolve it, but give them that realistic feedback. Promote opportunities to work is the last of these 5 overarching constructs within which we work when we are doing career education. Service providers, teachers, mobility specialists, AT specialists, counselors, and frankly, parents, we are the ones who are the most likely to give youngsters with blindness or severe low vision that first opportunity to work, either through chores or volunteer activities or actual paid work that we bring youngsters in to do for us. And those early opportunities are critical in the lives of young people who are blind or visually impaired. I remind you quickly of the stages of career education. The first is career awareness, followed by exploration, preparation, placement. And then once they've aged out of our K to 12 systems and moved into hopefully full-time work or part-time work while they are in university or college, the stage of career education that they enter into as adults is called maintenance, followed by mentoring. In the first 12 years, K to 12, we are focusing on awareness, exploration. By middle school, we're moving hardcore into preparation, and ideally, by the time they're in high school, moving into placement in terms of the stages of the career education model. I remind you also about these intervention levels that I shared with you about last week. Informational level students, who are the 10% who are pretty much self-motivated, who are active learners, engaged learners. These youngsters, if you have them on your caseload, will have completed that first developmental stage, or all of those early stages of the career development model, and will be late in the preparation stage, learning skills that will transfer into life activities and work beyond school. They'll be already in that preparation stage by late elementary, certainly full on in middle school. And during high school, these students will typically move into the placement stage, ideally working as volunteers or for paid work no later than their sophomore, junior year in high school. It's critical to understand the importance of this stage, this placement stage, because there is good statistical evidence that work, employment, paid employment outside of the home, outside of school, during high school, leads to success for adults who are blind or visually impaired. The more work, the better. These informational level students with the service providers, all of you, what I would encourage you to do with these students is to really challenge them while they are working with you, to do better, to do more, to meet your expectations and to exceed your expectations, to meet their gen ed teachers' expectations and exceed those expectations, and to offer up, all of you, resources and support. I've given you in the handouts my resource lists that I encourage you to share with students, with parents, with other service providers, so that you can make sure that the kids you're working with are accessing the materials, the resources, the tools that they need as they are in middle school and preparing to move into high school, and certainly when they are in high school, to independently access those resources. Insist that the students you are working with use their blindness-specific skills. It's not okay to just learn how to do something and leave it alone. They need to keep using it, those tools, those materials, the software packages you've introduced them to. They need to use them, and you'll see it if they apply those already learned skills in the work they're doing for you now. For parents and caregivers, I would encourage each of you as service providers to truly encourage parents and caregivers to give young people responsibilities and chores, age-appropriate chores. There's a handout specific to age-appropriate chores in your toolbox, and I encourage you to share that with caregivers and ask them to make the kids working with them, living with them, for whom they are providing supports, to do the chores on the list. Encourage volunteerism and community involvement. Middle school is a wonderful time to start volunteering in the community, getting involved in the community, and to make yourself known to the community. They're still cute enough that people are interested in having them on board. And if they get used to them, they're encouraged by their engagement. They will include them later when they come to them for paid employment, frankly. Instructional students, that's the 75%, the sort of average intellectual abilities, average motivation. These are the kids who pretty much require us to provide them with incentives to keep them moving and to encourage them. We give them grades, we give them stars. If we're parents, we give them an allowance. They need those incentives, frankly, to keep learning and to keep moving through the developmental stages. But they are as likely as those informational level students to move through those developmental stages in the career education model on age level, if they have had the supports that they've needed in school. The supports and then the acquisition, of course, of those compensatory skills or blindness-specific skills. These youngsters also need to work as volunteers when they're in middle school, as volunteers or in paid employment when they are in high school. Their chances of being successful in terms of gaining employment are increased 3-4% if they will work while they are in high school. For the service providers with instructional level students, I think it's the easiest thing to say is that it's always about connecting the dots for these students. They are engaged when they have interest, self-motivation to learn something. But if they are not that terribly interested, they need to be helped to understand how what they are learning in the here and now can be used in further studies, work, and life. Connect the dots for these kids. And with these youngsters, again, insist that they use the skills that you've taught them and the tools that they've been loaned or have purchased or have been introduced to. They need to use those skills and the tools. With caregivers, I would ask you to encourage them, to encourage the young people that live with them to do chores and to participate in community activities with their families, with extended family members, with neighborhoods, with groups. So if they're involved in Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts or any variation on that theme, they need to participate in those community activities that those groups are performing. And then always, always to support their work-related activities. If they need assistance getting to and from a volunteer job, to make that happen. If they need assistance, financial assistance to be engaged in community activities, tuition, fees, that kind of thing, it's those caregivers who need to provide that. And I would encourage you to encourage them to participate and support those activities. Advocacy level students, if you were with me last week, you remember these are the students, about 15% of the population, frankly, who are going to require supports for life. They're not going to be able to learn all of the skills that they would need to be entirely self-sufficient moving forward into adult life. They are always and forever going to need some kind of ongoing support for life. And frankly, I would say all of these students are multiply disabled. They will have vision impairment and something else. It may be severe autism, it may be deafness or hearing impairment, it may be cerebral palsy, but many times it is cognitive impairment coupled with blindness that puts these folks into an advocacy level kind of situation where they need that external support in order to function in a very, very complicated world in which we live. Ideally, these students receive instruction in the settings where they will live and work, natural environments where they will live and work outside of school. And that's the very best place to provide instruction. I realize it's not always possible, but ideally, that's where it happens. If you are providing instruction within a clinical or classroom environment, you need to replicate as near as possible those environments to which they will move when they leave school. So again, it's about thinking about the future, planning for the future, thinking about where they're going to live, where they're going to work, if they're going to work, if they're going to move into day activity centers, what are the skills that they're going to require to be able to be accommodated within those environments. Most of these students, advocacy level students, are candidates for supported or customized employment. They are not typically candidates for full-on competitive employment. As service providers, I am always going to encourage you to do the maximum amount of research that you can do to find out what those post-secondary options and supports are that are available locally for students who are advocacy level, and to visit those options whenever possible with team members, including family members or caregivers, because it's finding out about those next environments that's going to serve you and that student best in the current environment. For caregivers, I'm always going to be encouraging them, and I would like you to encourage them, those parents, to start their investigation of next environment options while these kids are still kids. While they're in middle school is a golden opportunity, if they haven't already started in late elementary, to move and to start looking at what's out there, what's available in their home community that's viable for this child that they have with severe multiple disabilities who is an advocacy level youngster. They need to be provided with information about how to develop a guardianship plan so that they can do that. And they need to identify the support mechanisms that are available in the preferred environments, who's actually working those environments where they would like their child to live or work, and how do you negotiate supports from those service providers moving forward into the future. Now, I really want to spend the bulk of my time with you this afternoon about talking about what we need to be doing moving forward as service providers. So always the first thing is to assess those current skill levels. Make sure that you know where their functional skills are at the moment you're picking up and starting to work with them. And to establish goals and objectives with the students and the rest of the team that indicate their acquisition of current skills and also target those skills that they need and want to develop moving forward into either high school or post-secondary training or work. The goals and objectives that you set today need to be reflective of what they want to achieve in that next environment. I think in middle school, you're still doing quite a bit of teaching, direct teaching, but I hope that you're moving more and more and more toward facilitation of skill application and monitoring of skill application. For sure by high school, I think unless the student is adventitiously blinded, adventitiously visually impaired, most of these kids, if they've come up through good training situations in elementary and middle school, are ready for you as a TVI or as an O&M to take a step back and really not be so much involved in direct instruction as you are facilitating and monitoring to ensure that they've learned the skills you've taught them and are applying them appropriately in the environment they're in, whether that's middle school or high school. High school, they're really full on typically in gen ed classes with those of us providing supports, monitoring, making sure that they can use the tools that they've been instructed to use, making sure that they're using those tools efficiently, productively, monitoring their progress to make sure that everything is in order. Direct instruction, when it happens, is oftentimes in these areas of the expanded core curriculum where they may not have had full-on good instruction in the general education environment, in social skills, in career education, in independent living skills, self-determination skills. Hopefully they have, but if not, that's where I would see the bulk of your direct instruction happening in high school. Document the progress that your students are making. They should be the lead person. So student-led documentation is ideal, particularly for those informational and instructional level students. But as the TVI or the O&M or the AT person, you want to make sure that your students really are putting down on paper, virtual or otherwise, what they've learned and what progress they've made in terms of skill development over time. Finalize those life career plans with your students. Make sure that before you get into that transition IEP, that you and the students have talked about what it is they want to get accomplished, what they need to be doing right now to make those accomplishments happen, and build it into a life career plan. I want to share with you very quickly some of the assessment tools that are available for you to use with your students in this middle school, high school age range, transition aged kinds of students. The first one is one that I mentioned last week to everyone, which is the Career Education Competencies Checklist, which will take students right up through high school. I encourage you to use the Transition Competencies Checklist with middle school and high school students to make sure they're moving along as they need to be moving in order to transition into work and adult environments, adult responsibilities. If you have a youngster who is unsure about interests, abilities, and how to link those to careers, jobs, the Self-Directed Search by John Holland is a really good tool that I recommend. It's available in an accessible format online. Perkins Total Life Learning Tool is a good transition aged tool for youngsters with additional disabilities. My very favorite vocational tool for youngsters with multiple disabilities, including deaf blindness, is the vocational profile form for deafblind youth. It is embedded in the Transition Tote materials if you have access to those. And then I remind all of you that those teacher-made observation checklists are worth their weight in gold. So use them, put them into the record so that students moving through the process will be able to reference back to them, as well as other service providers, to see what the students have accomplished working with you. Some specific ideas for middle school students that I'd like to share with you this afternoon. I think with these youngsters, monitoring is really a huge part of what you ought to be doing in middle school. Making sure that your students that you're responsible for are completing their classroom assignments and their homework, and in a timely fashion. You know, one of the big problems these kids run into is that people make excuses for them and say, oh, well, you didn't have time to finish it, not to worry, you can turn it in tomorrow. Or you didn't have time to finish it, not to worry, take another 15, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever you need. But the truth of the matter is that every time they don't get something in on time, the same amount of time that their non-disabled peers were getting that assignment in on, they are falling further and further behind in the competition for good placements at university, college, and into work. Yes, I understand. Special education makes allowances, gives these kids extra time, but I'm sharing with you, frankly, that informational and instructional level students need to be doing their work in a timely fashion and as close to the same amount of time as humanly possible to their non-disabled peers. Otherwise, they are not going to be as competitive when they exit out of school. Help the kids that you're working with understand it's okay if you need to take an accommodation like extra time, but you need to look at what is keeping you from being able to perform in the same amount of time as your sighted peers and work on developing those skills. You need to chart how they're doing with their classroom assignments and their homework assignments in terms of both time, how long it's taking them, and quality. I may say this again, but let me say it right now because I think it's important. If you have the opportunity to capture work being completed by some of those sighted kids, and you can de-identify that and make it into an accessible format for the students that you're responsible for, it's really helpful for them to compare literally their work and the work of other students without disabilities. So they can start to get a sense of how are they doing in terms of the quality of their work and the timeliness of their work compared to their peers. When you have the opportunity, monitor your students whenever possible in their participation in extracurricular activities. Do they do band? Do they do choir? Do they engage in sport? If so, are they actively engaged? Are they managing to keep up? If not, are there some accommodations that you can look at together that would enable them to be better participants, more engaged participants, more competitive participants? And ask your students, are they doing any kind of volunteer work? Make it clear that it is an expectation of yours that they will volunteer either at school or in their home communities, that they get involved with hospitals or other schools or nurseries, whatever is available in their community, so that they can start to get some of this work experience that they need. For those students with multiple disabilities, those advocacy level students, increase school-based demands. Don't let these kids just drift along doing the same amount of work all day, every day that they were doing when they were in elementary. They need to step it up. They need to have greater demands than they had when they were in elementary, so that they can start building skill, building communication skills, building manual skills, building their academic skills. These kids tend to get stuck in a rut, and you want to push them beyond that. Infuse vocational skill development routines that can be charted. If they are doing activities that involve quantities of work, chart that to see how well they're performing, if they're making progress over time. These youngsters also need to be challenged. It's just that we do our challenging in a slightly different way. It's more directive, frankly. Those students who are advocacy level are not probably going to be doing as many chores as the kids who are informational and instructional level, but they should all be doing chores. And where possible, you need to ask the students with whom you're working what kinds of chores they're taking on. And if they are indeed adding more responsibility at home and in their community-based activities than they were doing when they were in elementary. Ask specifically, what are you doing now that you weren't doing when you were in 5th grade, 6th grade, whatever the case may be? And then I really am very hardcore about this volunteerism and extracurricular activities, because it's really setting the stage for many of these youngsters to have support networks beyond school, friends, resources that they can reach out to make connections into the community. And their volunteerism is going to set the stage for these informational and instructional level students to move into paid work when they get into high school. These students with multiple disabilities, you want to increase their community-based activities with those next environment settings in mind. So whenever you can get out into the community to do shopping trips, exploratory trips on mobility, or if you are a TVI and you are able to accompany some of these students on field trips or into community-based learning experiences where they are shopping or attending activities that may provide them with some skills or give you some insight into their interest levels. I think about oftentimes I'll see students going out on field trips to the Humane Society, and oftentimes these youngsters with multiple disabilities will be attracted to animals, engaged with animals, and it's something to note in their file and to keep in the back of your mind as an opportunity possibly for volunteer work moving on into high school, for example. With your information and instructional level students, you want to evaluate as soon as possible in middle school their understanding of work. Do they understand occupational clusters, that lawyers and legal secretaries go together? Do they understand that doctors and nurse practitioners and technicians work in similar kinds of environments and are clustered in that healthcare profession? Do they understand the work that their family members are doing and what occupational cluster those family members belong to? Do they understand the kind of preparation that it takes to move into one of those occupations if they are interested in it? Do they understand routine or standard schedules that most employed Americans work a 40-hour week? And if they go beyond 40 hours, that's typically overtime. Do they understand salaries and compensation, the difference between gross and net earnings? These are the kinds of basic understanding that we expect of youngsters in middle school. Do the students you're working with have this level of understanding? Find out from your students what they know about their parents' work and other significant adults. Do they understand your job? Do they understand the training that you had to undertake to become a TVI or an O&M or an AT specialist? Do they understand what kinds of jobs are related to the work that you do? Do they understand all the different jobs in the school and how those are related? In their medical community, in their church community, do they understand what these significant adults are doing, how they prepared for those jobs, and what they like and don't like about those jobs? It's important that kids start thinking critically about work and jobs in middle school and moving into high school. If youngsters are advocacy level, they are not going to be able to self-place. They will be placed by others, parents, counselors, social workers, whomever. If they're not able to self-place, it's important that you begin the process with the team of evaluating those post-high school options and visiting them, because that's what they need to know about, and it's what you need to know about. Determine how well your informational and instructional level students with vision impairment have acquired in their academic content. Do they really understand the concepts that they've learned? Can they articulate those to you? Can they give you examples of where they might use them or with whom they might talk about those academic content acquisitions that they have? And those work behaviors, or soft skills we call them, that are demonstrated by their peers with good vision. Do they have those same work behaviors? Not that all sighted kids are demonstrating good work behaviors, but I think a lot of times kids without good vision are unaware of the importance of cooperation between students or team members when you get to work, are not necessarily aware of the importance of self-initiated behavior. So starting their work on time, not waiting for you to come in, not waiting for the other for the teacher to say it's time to get started. These are those soft skills that are going to make or break these kids in terms of job maintenance moving forward. If they have good soft skills, they'll be able to stay on jobs. If they have good academic skills coupled with good soft skills, they'll be able to get those jobs and keep those jobs. Set goals with your students to remediate any performance deficits. And I'm thinking here both about quality and quantity in terms of performance. For students with multiple disabilities, determine whether they have those prerequisite skills for placement in that next environment. Do they have both avocational and vocational skills? What do they enjoy doing when they are not being directed by a teacher or a paraprofessional in an activity? Do they enjoy listening to music? Do they enjoy playing games? Do they enjoy, what do they enjoy doing? And can it be functional for avocational pursuits, recreational pursuits when they leave school? And what do they enjoy doing and are good at doing that can be parlayed into a vocational activity in that next environment? Make sure that you're keeping up with both the vocational and avocational side of the equation for these students with multiple disabilities. Because many of them, if they can make it into supported or customized work, will not be working 40-hour weeks. Most of the young adults and older adults, frankly, that I see in the community with multiple disabilities, advocacy level clients, are working 15, 20 hours a week maximum. Occasionally you'll see someone who's working 30 hours a week, but it's rare. And so the avocational side is as important as the vocational side. And of course, I think all of you know that when you're working with these advocacy level students, those independent living skills are of paramount importance in terms of placement beyond school. If they've got those basic grooming skills or personal management skills, if they have some basic or rudimentary home management skills, they'll be able to work in and be accepted more readily into a supported living environment. The less support they need for activities of daily living, this is another way to say it, the better their opportunities in terms of next environment for living options. If they don't have good home and personal management skills, they may end up having to live in an assisted living kind of an environment or fully supported living environment like an ICFMR facility rather than in a group home or supported living where they are able to have the freedoms that they can manage and the supports that they need. It's all about juggling with these students where you're going to put your energy. And I would encourage you to be thinking about independent living skills, avocational and vocational skills as the three big critical pieces to build a future for advocacy level students. I think with all your students, but particularly with these informational and instructional level students, you need to help these kids assess their interests, their abilities, their values, and their work personality. Interests are the easiest piece to answer here because it's what they really like doing. Abilities are those things they're good at doing, both by their perception and by the perception of others. Values are those things they believe in and oftentimes are a reflection of their parents' values, to be very honest with you. There are activities within some of the resources that I'm going to share with you to help students evaluate values. It's more difficult than interests and abilities. And it's more difficult because I think that ultimately kids, young adults, need to rank order their values to make good decisions about the future. And then in terms of work personality, I mentioned to you earlier the self-directed search, which is John Holland's work. And it's all based on work personality and matching work personality to work environments. Again, I'll give you more information if you want it, but that's the preferred methodology that I use when I'm working with young people to help them understand their work personality, to help them figure out what careers to explore. Help these students begin to identify career clusters to do research and jobs they may want to investigate, and then teach them the research skills to make sure that they can do that independently. For students with multiple disabilities, it's more about observation, observing the students and documenting evidence of interests, abilities, values, and work personality. It means you need to know all of this so that you can then watch and see where your students with multiple disabilities or advocacy level needs, where they land in terms of interests, abilities, values, and work personality. Engage families and service providers in sorting this puzzle. Ask them to also evaluate those students, observe those students, and document interests, abilities, values, and work personality. Help your students investigate their career interests by giving them internet resources to research and books to read. I've given you lots and lots and lots of resources. This is where it really comes to bear, is when the students need to investigate, at which point I would send them probably to the Occupational Outlook Handbook, or the what used to be called the Occupational Outlook Quarterly is now called Career Planning, I believe. I'll tell you in just a second when we get to the resources, but those two internet sources are probably the place that I would start because they are brilliant. There are lots of good books out there. There was a whole series that AFB did at one point about different kinds of jobs that people with blindness and visual impairment were performing. Biographies and autobiographies of blind and visually impaired people are great resources to investigate careers. These advocacy level students are not going to be researching online. They're not going to be reading books. You're going to need to take these students to different kinds of work environments and match up their interests so that they can be exposed to the world of work. Whenever possible, introduce them to adults with similar disabilities. I've got to go really, really fast now because I'm just making it to the high school piece, and I wanted to be at resources by now, but let me rip through this next section, thinking specifically about these high school students. Monitor application of literacy skills, reading and writing for self and others, calculating income and debits, work with charts and graphs, tactile charts, tactile graphs. Make sure these kids understand how to follow those graphics. Monitor to see whether their speaking and listening skills in conversations and presentations are age appropriate. Assess your students' creative thinking, decision-making, use of innovative approaches to disability-related issues. Can they problem solve the situations they get themselves into? Can they figure out how to use the skills they've already acquired and develop workarounds for disability-related problems? Make sure they understand ability versus need. Do they need something because they have a disability or because they just want it? And then their reasoning. Can they use logical, objective thinking in day-to-day problem solving? Document your students' soft skills. Do you see evidence of responsibility, taking care of self and their personal and borrowed tools and equipment, for example? Document that. Do you see evidence that they have good self-esteem, that they are comfortable with their abilities and their disabilities? Their sociability skills, are they engaged with both peers and adults? Do they give you evidence of self-management skills? Do they make and keep their own appointments? Do you see evidence that they are honest, that they have integrity, that there's no lying, no cheating, no stealing. Document that and let them know that you've seen the evidence of these soft skills so that the kids will understand that this is important moving forward. I have here again, document, but with parentheses, student-led. Ask your students to document for you in writing, Braille or print. Electronic is okay, but not as good, in my estimation, as hard copy. I like my students to hand me a hard copy of the documentation of their participation in work activities. What chores are they doing? How often are they doing? What's the compensation over time? Chores at home and school, volunteer work in the community, job shadowing experiences, any informational interviews that they complete. I want all of that documented. Yes, it needs to be in electronic format ultimately, because it will ultimately go into resumes and onto applications. But initially, I would start with hard copy and encourage them to generate it electronically if you like, and then push it out to you in hard copy and brailled if they are Braille readers for self, so that they can see the documentation over time about their participation. It will help them encode it and grain it and be able to articulate it when they go for interviews. Internships and apprenticeships, obviously you want documentation, and all appropriate paid work in the community, after school, on weekends, during school holidays. Document, 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 and ask your students to do the documentation for you. Document those written career life plans, all the research that they do into post-secondary training related to their career options, their negotiations for external supports as needed, if they negotiate with their parents for a ride, if they negotiate with an Uber driver to get them here or there, that should all be documented. Their active participation in community through work, play, and civic responsibility. They need to make notes of references, tools, and skills used, everything, so that they have that coming out of high school. Otherwise, they'll be struggling to try to remember it when I ask them as an adult career counselor. For students with multiple disabilities, document their career portfolios, their functional academic skills in reading, writing, calculating, attending, and communicating with written reports. Pictures when you can get them, and videos when you can get them that focus on their abilities. But the still pictures are most important. Present evidence of their interests, values, and work personality in those IEP meetings, and share those with adult service providers ultimately. Define their optimum learning styles and techniques for teaching. Get it into the record so that those adult service providers don't have to learn what you learned about how they learn best. Provide as many work experiences as possible in natural environments. Record any relevant work experiences that they capture, and the contact information so that adult service providers can come back to those work sites and query the contact. Include still pictures of work activities whenever possible. Investigate next environment options with the educational team and plan for placement. Include the student in futures planning. Invite everyone to the meetings, family members, significant others, adult service providers, both public and private, and share written follow-up notes with all interested parties. I'm sorry to rip through it so quickly, but I want to take a minute here at the end to give you some solid resources. Probably the most important one that I can tell you off the top is the Transition Tote system. It's available through APH, American Printing House, on federal quota. There's a student manual, a student backpack, and there is a facilitator's guide. As a TVI or an O&M, you need the facilitator's guide. It's available in print or electronic format, Braille. You need it. It gives you the student manual as well so that you can follow along with your students, but it also gives you how to adapt every single lesson for that instructional level student or that advocacy level student, because the student manual is directed toward informational level students. And so for these advocacy level students or these instructional level students, that's the majority of the students you're working with, you need the facilitator's guide to give you further direction on how to modify the curriculum to meet their needs. There's also a set of materials that I've developed called the pre-employment program. We used it at Perkins in conjunction with the Transition Tote system. That's the best of both worlds. It was actually designed for adults with visual impairments, but is adaptable for youth. It's available through RNIB, the Royal National Institute of the Blind, but it comes in English, not American. So if you want the American version, you should reach out to me directly. There's no fee for that service, but it is copyright protected under Creative Commons. I give you first some books, Teaching Social Skills, ECC Essentials, Quick and Easy ECC Lessons, and Foundations of Education as, I think, sort of critical mass content on career education. This is the hyperlink to get you to the Transition Tote system from APH, and the hyperlink to get you to the trainer's manual for the pre-employment program from RNIB. Or, like I said, you're welcome to reach out to me and I'll send you the Americanized version. This next hyperlink is to the Perkins pre-employment program. One of the things that we did there was a little intro to the Perkins pre-employment program and the importance of career education that I did for Perkins, which is up on their website, and this link will take you directly there. It's a wonderful tool for sharing with parents, frankly, and other service providers. One of the best resources out there, in my estimation right now, is Project Aspiro. This link takes you directly there. There are wonderful checklists for communication skills, mobility skills, social skills, all kinds of home and personal management skills. There's also a wonderful section called Success Stories, which takes you directly to stories of blind and low vision people around the world who are working in a variety of jobs, who tell their stories, or links to external resources of blind and visually impaired people talking about their jobs. Wonderful way to introduce students to adults who are blind or visually impaired doing things that they may never have considered. There's a beekeeper, for example, from Uganda. There are all kinds of people doing all kinds of jobs, chefs, teachers, lawyers. It's a great resource, and that's the hyperlink to get you there. Mississippi State University did a wonderful transition activity calendar. Some of you may be familiar with it already. They've revised it, and this is the link to the revised edition. It's applicable to middle school and high school students who are informational and instructional level. If you're working this population, I encourage you to grab it. Again, it's a free resource. This is an interesting article that I came across in the NFB Braille Monitor called Transition is Never Easy, IEP Advice to a Middle School Teacher. Worth a read if you're a middle school teacher. This next hyperlink is to the ARCS self-determination scale. Yes, it was designed for people with developmental disabilities, but I think it's one of the best tools out there and can be modified easily for assessment of blind and low vision students' self-determination. And the procedural guidelines are available as well. These are just a series of links for you that I thought you would find particularly interesting. Foster and Ahrensberger's article called Empower Students with Your Words, a great resource for teachers. Hands and Voices presentation by Matthew is a severely hearing impaired and vision impaired fifth grader, talking about preparing for his future. Penny Rosenblum's Penny Rosenblum's seminar or power, what was it? It was, I'm stumbling over my words, a webinar that Penny did talking about non-driving strategies for children and youth, which I think is brilliant. Penny is herself someone with low vision, so it's very meaningful to middle school and high school students. A trailer for a documentary film by a group of blind teenagers called Do You Dream in Color? Rural Institute on Disabilities work on vocational rehabilitation and blind services, pre-employment and transition services. The Department of Labor's Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. And then last but not least, this resource that I mentioned to you earlier from Bureau of Labor Statistics, Occupational Outlook Handbook. That's the link. And the Career Outlook, I stumbled over its name, used to be called the Occupational Outlook Quarterly, and I can't get past that. But those are all worth checking out. On this last page, I've given you some resources from APH's Career Connect. Used to be AFB, but it's gone over to APH now. These links are the best, I think, for middle school and high school students. Information on teaching independent living skills. And then last but not least, of course, just a reminder to reach out to me if you have any concerns or questions. I'm sorry I don't have time for those today, but I know Conchita probably has something that she needs to do right at the end here, and we've only got like 2 minutes to make it happen.
Thank you so much for all of that great information. And I think all of the resources that are embedded into the PowerPoint are really important. And then also there's a lot of resources in the Dropbox links. So all of you should have received those from me. If you need them, feel free to email me to get them, conchita.hernandez@maryland.gov. And I'm going to do a closing poll. So if you can just answer a couple of questions. The first is, how did you find the quality of the webinar on a scale of 1 to 5? So 1 is not useful at all and 5 is excellent. And the next one is, was there information from the webinar that you will use in your practice? So just 2 questions there. Thank you so much for Dr. Wolffe being a part of these sessions. And we have one more session with Dr. Wolffe you all will not want to miss.